Three,
All right.
2, 1.
Oh boy.
So I came into this, from the same way that everyone else did with that initial Ocean dub, but also had access to the other stuff. And there were other, it was people that, friends that had older siblings, or that had the internet, so they could actually look up, okay, here's stuff that's coming. And I think that Dragon Ball had actually finished airing before like everyone kind of got into it. I think that they'd actually finished the series. I think it
Mhm.
ended in '96. So about the
Yes.
same time it's on Cartoon Network. It had already finished in Japan. So the really in the know people knew about Cell, Androids, Boo, all everything else that's coming. Um, that us American kids could only guess at. And I remember like I think it was Final Bout, um, on PlayStation, that was a fighting game that had characters that we had no context for, Kid Buu and Go Tanks and the fusions and everything else.
Mhm.
Um, but it did create this sense of possibility, that was something special. It was this kind of point of connection for a lot of kids, and this sort of absurdities, this over the top fighting, um, but also like knowing that okay, it's good. There's good stuff coming. We just have to like stay the course.
Mhm. Keep waiting. I was just thinking as I was talking to you because I as you were telling me about your history of it there, I kind of like I was aware of Toonami around that time, and I watched the Ocean dub first, kind of
Mhm.
interspersed. I'd seen a lot of it, like at friends' houses and things like that. So I kind of remember I didn't have access to it because I didn't really have cable after a certain point. So all the stuff after Goku arrives on Namek, I literally got the VHS tapes, which were the first
Mhm.
Funimation dub, I guess at the same time.
Yeah.
So I built up this collection my mom got for me over several years. So that was my access to it of the Funimation dub. But I remember that shift of like, whoa. But I was thinking about the Osha dub, and I was thinking about all the silly edits and sending people to another dimension, etc. Then you got the other shifting dub, and of course you had Kai years later, which kind of I think
Mhm.
interjected some life into it. And I know that a lot of that stuff through translation and censorship, there's a lot of stuff that was quite different in a lot of ways from the actual manga when you finally
Mhm.
read it, which I do think is quite great, Toriyama's manga. But I think it's kind of amazing and probably says something that the show connected with so many people through all those dubs and all those issues over time and still found popularity and still
Mhm.
endured. Do you think that I'm going to kind of give you a hard question maybe? Do you think that what do you think there's that element that was able to kind of break through? And for me, it's always felt like despite all those things, it's still Dragon Ball. Like the
Mhm.
core of Dragon Ball, even with those early dubs, is somehow still there. Even though if you watch Kai, which is much closer to the manga, the dialogue being different, the feel being a little different tonally in some ways, it's there's more humor. Uh, what do you think? Do you think there is an element that is a core essence that permeates throughout all versions that's still purely Dragon Ball? Because I'm not sure what it is. What
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah. I mean, can't say for sure. I think that, it's that alchemy of different mixes. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is a show that's popular. The media property is popular worldwide. South America, in
Mm-hmm.
particular, is a huge consumer of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so some of it, I think, credit to Toriyama's art, it is very translatable. The
Mm-hmm.
characters are very expressive. You can just looking at it go, okay, that guy's a villain, that guy's a hero. There's a certain style to it that you can pretty clearly just instantly pick up on. It's not particularly complicated. It's not, there's not a lot of depth to it, but it doesn't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that really makes this work is the show's sense of empathy.
Hmm.
That
Okay.
defeat meaning friendship, that a character like Piccolo, who is introduced at even in Z, he starts off as a kind of antagonistic villain. He kills Goku. It's for the greater good, but
Hmm.
um, he kills Goku off in like the fourth episode. Um, and we
Hmm.
didn't have the context for the Demon King Piccolo, Piccolo Daimo, and all the other everything else
Hmm.
before that point. Although did eventually get the flashbacks later on during the Cell Saga where they actually explained Red Ribbon and a
Hmm.
lot of stuff that hadn't actually been done. That Dragon Ball hadn't really been fully dubbed at that point either. The original Dragon
Hmm.
Ball, so these historical contexts that people kind of knew a little bit because of internet. But the idea of defeat meaning friendship and the idea of like perseverance of training, being able to overcome everything. Um, yeah, the show can be a little bit silly at times, in terms of like,
Sure.
oh, we need to train more to do this. To like, the absurdity of like, yes, lifting weights is going to help you, shoot beams harder or something.
Yeah. It's a
It's
little unclear how the power scale works,
yeah,
like.
it gives it a sense of progression, and specifically
Hmm.
as a grit and perseverance. But I think the empathy, the sense of the villains, at this point, of Super, even Frieza, a pretty terrible monstrous villain, has a degree of redemption,
Hmm.
that had happened previously with Piccolo. Even Krillin, who in the original Dragon Ball is kind of a starts off as a jerk, but
Hmm.
pretty quickly is won over, or Tien or Chaozu, and this cast pretty much all start as antagonists that slowly get won over. Once the kids are involved, the kids are all, none of the kids are particularly terrible, but Vegeta
Hmm.
maybe being the biggest one, although I think Piccolo, I think, has maybe the most interesting arc of the series.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah.
and it's maybe we can get into that, but there is that the it's not just defeat means friendship, it's that it's earned in a way that I don't think any series had really done before that point. But it sets it apart. It feels different from anything on American TV. Even
Oh
quality
yeah.
shows like Gargoyles that do engage in some similar things. Xanatos sort of goes through that same arc of the villain, but then kind of helpful, and then an actual like part of the team. Um, but this was doing it doing it earlier, doing it better, and doing it in a way that I'd never seen anything like that before. As fun as cool as the fights were, as much as they stood out, um, there was something there, that you just weren't getting from any other American show at the time.
Hmm. No, I agree. I like what you said there with the idea of this kind of combating and kind of finding this equal footing and earning respect, which of course is kind of like your shonen fighting trope, which Dragon Ball really helped establish. But I like that too. That it is a really good message. I think Goku's got this sort of purity of heart as a kid, and really throughout much of his adult life, to just he has this, even though he's not exactly the most selfless person, there is still this inherent goodness, like you said, in the character design and in his portrayal. And he can win just about anybody over through that, through his character, his willingness to fight and persevere for those that he cares about. And really, just the fact that he just seems like a good guy and a pure hearted
Mhm.
kind of guy in a lot of ways. And you're right, that wins so many people over. And all these characters, many of them are redeemed, and the fact that you can be redeemed, and the people that are your enemies you can bring in to be part of your circle, part of your community, your friends. I love that idea.
Mhm.
And I just kind of, I guess, bouncing off that, for me, like you said, I think other than the over the top fights and the quality action, and you're right, just the whole portrayal of everybody, the display of it, the operatic nature on that
Mhm.
scale, that just it was so different, so Japanese, and just unlike any like show at the time on Saturday morning cartoons. It definitely felt different. And but I also think on top of all that and the absurdity and the wackiness of the world, I do think it's about the characters for me. I think
Mhm.
Dragon Ball has a lot of really good, strong characters that most of whom are not particularly complicated, but they're very well defined, and they have strong, really strong defining characteristics, and they're all interesting. A lot of them, their designs, they're very different from each other. Tien or Yamcha and
Mhm.
Krillin I've always really liked. You're right, and they all have something distinctive they bring to the mix that anybody could gravitate to depending on their interests or their what types of characters they like. But I do think that I remember when I was starting the channel early on, one of my things was nobody was really looking at these characters and trying to analyze them and
Mhm.
try to give them some value. And I do think it's funny. There isn't a lot of complication, but I think that a lot of people took it for granted, which is one of the reasons why I started doing some of those videos. And I think some of the best examples, though, are there are a couple characters that I think do have some interesting arcs through redemption. And I think, yeah, Piccolo and Vegeta, of course, most famously, are probably the best examples of that. But they're such good archetypes, and they're so interesting, and
Mhm.
I think it's funny people gravitate to them a lot. I often kind of go, yeah, back around with which characters I like the most, but yeah, Piccolo I always thought was awesome. I kind of
Mhm.
want to sense he might be your favorite character because you brought him up a couple times. Would that be wrong, or
Yeah, I
do you
think
have
that's
does he does
probably like right at this point, as much that and I've had different favorite characters over the course of things, but I think Piccolo and Krillin are the ones that I probably come back to the most. I do love Gohan, although
Mhm.
I feel like he kind of plateaus.
Get shafted a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, he kind of reaches, he should have been the hero and kind of isn't, and
Yeah, and I've heard about that was editors. Editors seem like they kind of push Toriyama a lot, which I think is unfortunate for as much creativity as he had. It isn't. I mean,
mhm.
maybe it's for the good or the better. I don't. It's interesting how he wanted to end it like 5 or 6 different times in
Yeah,
the original end, and he just kept getting pushed because no, it's popular, more product. But he was able to kind of keep rolling with it, which bless him. But yeah, it's kind of amazing, and yeah, no, I agree with that too. I think it's interesting. Piccolo is a great one. I was always I it's interesting because I'm kind of I want to pick your brain a little because I want to talk a little bit about Piccolo, but for me and I think a lot of people, it seems like it's often, at least with the American audience of our age group, I think it's typically you're either in the your Goku or Vegeta camp. Um, I
mhm.
was a big fan of Vegeta pretty
Mhm.
much instantly. I loved him as a villain. I loved him when he was still kind of a villain throughout much of it, and I loved his arc and his redemption, which has been covered at length many times. But I'll admit that I always liked Krillin a lot, and Krillin has been my most consistent favorite character. And I always kind of go back to Krillin being my favorite, which makes me happy to hear you say that. So we'll have to talk
Mhm.
about Krillin because before half an hour, that's what we should do. But yeah, Piccolo for me as well. And I wanna say I'm curious. Is it because you like his arc and you find it the most interesting with the mythology? Because it is, I agree.
Yeah.
But is it also something as simple as he's the green guy with the cool cape? Because that design is amazing.
Yeah, the design
It's
is
just so cool.
amazing. Yeah. I think some of that, I mean, and part of it, like his arc is he's a teacher. Like his redemption is not, oh, we got to defeat the bigger guy. And it kind, starts it. But when he shows up, and I didn't have this context till years later. When he shows
Hmm.
up, he is training to kill Goku. He's like,
Hmm.
all right, we're gonna have a rematch. I'm gonna kill him, avenge my dad. Um, and is perfectly how there's no doubt, there's never any doubt that, like, yeah, I'm going to use this new technique to kill you. Yeah, we're
Hmm.
also going to stop the Raditz who's here to ruin our days, but
Oh,
he doesn't
Raditz.
think too much about that. But it's this relationship with Gohan of actually, okay, I've got to train this kid, um and the growing empathy and culminating in the sacrifice of him taking the saving the kid that in turn ends up being the thing that defeats Vegeta.
Hmm.
And then him being the kind of like, moment where comes back to Namek and has to save the day again.
Begrudgingly.
Begrudging, yeah, yeah. That sense of, okay, I'm going to do what needs to get done, but that slow growth of, um, that feels very earned. But he's also
Mhm.
kind of the guy, they do it a lot in the movies where he's the guy at the parties that's sitting alone. And then Vegeta also wants to sit alone, and there's kind of this interesting interplay between them of both of them are like, yes, I want to stand in the corner alone, while I'm
A
standing in the
little
corner. That
antisocial.
contributes very nicely to the comedy. And one of my favorite single episodes of Dragon Ball Z is the driving school one that is
I
just,
knew you were going to say that. I knew you
you
were going to bring
know,
that up.
it's just delightful because it's, let's take two of the world's strongest warriors and put them in the dumbest situation possible. But it works with him in a way I don't think it would have worked with Vegeta, who would have just gotten annoyed and flew off
Blowing
after,
things up.
5 minutes. But Piccolo
Mhm.
needs to prove that he can do this. That leads to the comedy of this sequence in the middle of, I think it's the part of the cell, and it's during the cell game stuff,
Cell
but
androids. Yeah, I think
somewhere in
so.
there, that is this nice
They
little
really
breather episode.
I think it's cool for as serious as the show often is, and it leans into that seriousness. Toriyama really is good at a lot of those wacky physical comedy
Mhm.
elements, and yeah, just putting these two powerful, super serious martial arts alien guys in a trying to put them in a normal situation. Those scenarios are some of the funniest in the show. I kind of wish they did more of them, like a whole spinoff of just them trying to lead normal lives like they do. They show snippets of it in the movies. I think that would be hilarious. Like that'd be really fun.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to get just a bunch of like 5 minute shorts of, the day-to-day lives of these people trying to, um, deal
Pay
with,
their taxes.
pay taxes, go shop, how to, Goku having to go shopping to buy enough food so that Chi-Chi can make the giant dinners. Like,
All the
is that?
ingredients, he has to
Yeah,
look on the list and see. Okay, gotta find
yeah,
nutmeg. Where is that? You know.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, but yeah, some of my favorite parts, and it's something I loved with the original Dragon Ball, that probably the comedy leaned into the comedy more.
mhm.
There are more comedic episodes. There are more, Dragon Ball Z. There aren't a lot of like comedic fights anymore.
No,
Um, Whereas, the original Dragon Ball, especially the tournaments, often had sort of the first few fights would be sort of silly or comedic. Bacteria fighting Krillin, and then the fight is resolved by, "Hey Krillin, remember you don't have a nose." Oh right. That is,
it's great.
yeah. That we kind of don't do as much there are comedic moments and comedic characters. Another favorite character of mine is Mr. Satan, who has, again, a great arc where he could have just been a one-off character, but,
Mhm.
plays into the comedy very well. Bribing Android 18 during the fight, but also fitting into the story with Boo and,
Mhm.
needing to be we need the energy to do the spirit bomb, but why should we listen to Goku? Ah, look, it's the world savior, Mr. Satan. Um, giving that, nice little arc in a way that, other shows would have just had him as a one-off comedic character, would have had him get blown up by Cell and been like, oh,
Mhm.
but does put him in the cast and does add to his character and make something, um,
Definitely
you know,
ties it into that idea of redemption with Boo
yeah,
also at the end a little bit.
yeah, yeah, not an
Yeah.
antagonistic, say it's not as antagonistic, but goes through his own mini redemptive arc so that he can have a much bigger arc for Boo, and sort of bring him into you know, the idea that nobody's so evil that they can't be redeemed. Um,
Except for Cell.
well, but Cell, I mean, even Cell is not so much that he's evil; it's just he's too arrogant. He can't work as part of the team. That isn't it,
Mm,
that
mhm. Mhm,
he's not
mhm.
evil in his own. He's just an arrogant
Well,
jerk.
Cell was pre-programmed to do one thing, and he can't really deviate too much from that program. I guess you could make the argument.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, and it is, and even Cell's an interesting commentary on Goku and Vegeta and kind of the like, what happens when they let their arrogance get too far.
Mhm.
Um, in a way that Piccolo kind of solves, figures himself out pretty early, but we still have like roughly half of the problems in the show are caused by Goku or Vegeta getting getting cocky and letting somebody power
Yeah.
up when they shouldn't, or
Yep.
um, including Sal.
Which is an interesting, flaw in their characters. Which some people could say that's lazy writing, but I think it's, I don't know, I think it adds to it a little of what the show's about, the gravitas and the masculine posturing and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think it adds. I mean, it makes them fallible characters in a way that um, we kind of weren't getting. Um, Superman in the animated, thinking of other shows at the time, Superman, Batman animated series, X-Men. A lot of these characters
They
were
got to take the guy
pretty,
down.
yeah, were pretty straightforward and pretty, we're the good guys, they're bad, we're going to stop them. Not to say
Hmm.
there weren't complicated characters, Batman's rogues gallery, and I think X-Men of roughly the same period, the animated series did a pretty good job having villains that had, actual motivations.
Yes,
Um,
but I see what you're saying. It's kind of like, even though they were complicated in their own way, there was still the clear line of good and evil, and it's
mhm.
not like the Batman or Wolverine isn't necessarily going to be as likely to just like, oh, I'm going to let Magneto or the Joker go through with this plan to see if I can beat him. Like, no, we gotta stop the guy at all costs, kind of.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
that
We were
line.
never going to get, okay, Batman finally, we were never going to get the longer term stuff of Batman finally gets through the Joker and Joker goes, okay, I'm gonna like, try to be a better person now and join, I'm gonna, be your sidekick.
Because then people would stop reading Batman
Well,
comics because
yeah, yeah,
superheroes are always they're caught in that loop.
yeah. It's not to say that we couldn't get redemptive arcs, especially in comics eventually, but Dragon Ball
Maybe.
was doing that better and consistently for an audience where I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I think Japanese audiences were used to the Fist of the North Stars, which is, good in its own right. But is just okay.
Hmm.
Kenshiro shows up, does his technique, kills the
Oh
bad
yeah.
guy, moves on. Um, it's usually
Hmm.
some kind of like, you know, throw wrenches in there occasionally, but Dragon Ball has a sense of progression that we don't get in other anime, and especially not in Western animation in the
Of the time.
90s.
Mhm. Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. That was the thing too. We get to kind of see the villains come back in this more serialized way, where as opposed to Batman or
Mhm.
something, it's more episodic, and those villains are interesting, but we don't get to see them grow as characters. So yeah, that is also a good
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get little bits and pieces, but often it's, Mr. Freeze at the beginning is already a tragic character, and you can add to that, you can build on that, but not
That's all
like we
he'll ever
get with
be.
Piccolo or Vegeta or even Krillin, who gets has the by Dragon Ball Z is friendly as part of the group, but still is dealing with that kind of his limitations as, yeah, I started off as equal to Goku, and now I'm already behind, and I'm always going to be behind, but I can still find ways to help.
Hmm.
That I really liked how they did his stuff in Super, of that rooftop fight, and the idea that, yeah, Krillin, and that, talking much more broadly about it, but these characters having stories that unfold over decades but feel like part of the same arc. Um,
Hmm.
that I think is a testament to Toriyama's storytelling ability. That there
Oh yeah.
is this ability to keep these threads here. The stories, yes, they're fairly simple. They're not super complicated, but they don't need to be.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a key. I do love the fact that it's still going,
mhm,
and yeah, Toriyama was able to kind of have almost add that sense of family. Like you really feel like they're together, their little picnics. They really do feel like they have been together a long time, and you can kind of revisit those characters. And it's one of those shows I think that really does that. I wanted to talk briefly a little bit more about Piccolo before we shifted to Krillin for a second, because I
mhm,
do like the fact you brought him up. I think Piccolo, definitely the Piccolo Kami stuff and the Namekian Dragon Balls. I think that at least up until a point, I think that was really just some of the most interesting lore building stuff,
mhm,
really in the whole show. Like I love that aspect of Piccolo's arc. Really, I love that, which is where we got some of those initial flashbacks to give us context. You mentioned like when Piccolo has to almost swallow his pride and
mhm,
meet up with Kami to fuse with him. I really love those scenes because it's almost like this internal conflict made physical, made
mhm.
manifest of this being that wanted to try to be this guardian, but was unworthy because of those darker aspects of himself, and literally purged it from himself, and it became another being, which was King Piccolo, which I found that stuff pretty fascinating. So there's this there's this literal division in Piccolo that is there all the time. He has to reconcile with himself literally, which is pretty cool. And I mean, would you agree? I feel like that's just I think that's the most interesting part of lore, at least up until that point.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, because it is, and it's part of in the original Dragon Ball, the like suspense and drama of the part of it with King Pickle is not only is he super strong, but well, we can't kill him because if he dies, then Kami's going to die, and it's this sense of danger, and it does play out well, very effectively with the death of Piccolo in the Saiyan arc of Dragon Ball Z, because then it sets up, oh right, we don't have the Dragon Balls to solve everything. It allows them to have this, and then we have to go to Namek and deal with that and everything that comes with that. It does set up some stakes in a way that had kind of been lost in some ways with Dragon Ball, because okay, we can always just use Dragon Balls to do a wish to bring people back to
Mhm.
set what went wrong, and yeah, we can only do it once. But I think it gets past that in a way that people often, oh, well, there's no stakes because people just come back all the time. It has to be earned. It's different ways of coming back, and it's played up in different ways, and something that I think works very
Well,
well.
you bring up an interesting uh, I think it does, and I wanted to actually pick your brain on that, Peter, because I that's one thing about Dragon Ball that always kind of confused me in retrospect, but always still impresses me is that this is a show that did keep those stakes so high, even though we could wish people back, and even though we actually see people die, and our heroes are just kind of floating around with the gods, and it's like this puffy, sweet place. It's like you know, death seems like it should have less of an impact when these bad guys are going around killing people. But for me, and I guess you and a lot of other people, that was never really a problem. Like there was always a sense of tension and stakes. How do you think Toriyama was able to pull that off, even though you could make the argument death isn't really that much of a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's sort of two answers. One is that with the original Dragon Ball, I think they set up the difficulty of actually getting the seven Dragon Balls together, especially when other people were also hunting them.
Mhm.
There was a weight to that of, yeah, it's not just like, yes, at the time of Z, it is just kind of like, yep, we went to got the Dragon Balls while you guys were training, and um,
Huh.
there is that Dragon Ball intrinsically has it's an adventure show, so that we do play up the needing to get these together and have to work on this and have to fight various monsters and eventually the Red Ribbon Army over acquiring the seven Dragon Balls to do what needs to be done. Um, but I think with Z, in addition to yanking the Dragon Balls out from under us after Piccolo dies, and okay, we've got to go on
Mhm.
this whole journey. Um, is that it treats death as part of the progression of part of the journey of okay. Goku dies, but now he's going to go train with King Kai, and then dies again, and now he's going to have an afterlife tournament. And with
Mhm.
the Buu saga, it specifically, okay, we need to send Gohan to the afterlife to get training with the Kais and all of that. That I think treats it as just another part of the progression. Death is not necessarily the end point, but it does have weight with a character like Grandpa Gohan. And again, we kind of it's an original Dragon Ball, but the episode where Goku has to fight, younger Goku has to fight the Grandpa Gohan in the rabbit mask. It is this emotional moment within that series. Death has weight, but it is that idea that it is just another part of the journey that I think matters with this. That in the sense that there will be sort of that the hanging over Dragon Ball in general is that sense that yeah, at some point it is that Goku's final death. Whether GT ends up being canon or not, at some point he will ride off on the dragon and cease to be part of the world. Whether that is the story or not, it just becomes part of the sense of progression. It's not the end of a character's journey, but another step. And then what they do within that space matters. And and even more recently with Frieza, with Resurrection F, but also Super and everything that followed with that. Of even Frieza's going through these sort of arcs within these journeys and needs to kind of go through that to achieve redemption, to have a chance to become a respected member of society, or to some extent anyways.
I think you brought up something else before we talk about Krillin really quickly. What I think Dragon Ball has a lot of, despite being a very violent show. You're making me kind of realize that Toriyama, I think, infused Dragon Ball with so much optimism
Mm-hmm.
about people and the world. There's so much belief that anyone can grow, anyone can change. There's always hope. Just have to keep working harder at it, which is pretty nice actually in your media. I think it's pretty nice to have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a show that lets characters they fail. There's a lot of moments when any other show would have, okay, we overcome it. But it's very, I think the original Dragon Ball does it more so, where Goku, outside of the first arc, usually gets, almost killed, whether, by Tambourine or um, by
Tower.
Patao or King Piccolo, like repeatedly, like, loses these fights and then narrowly survives because of dumb luck. That we play up again in Z, where sometimes the Saiyan fight is less about we're going to beat Nappa. It's about okay, we're going to fight and hope that our combined efforts and our different techniques are enough to win. And when it turns out it's not, it's okay. It's often we make fun of we're waiting for Goku, but it is the idea that everyone has something to contribute here. But sometimes you're going to fail. You're going to lose fights. You're going to have times when all of that training is not enough. Um, there's still that hope, that optimism. Um, but Goku loses to Vegeta pretty badly,
Yeah.
and needs everyone else to come back. The characters that were previously beaten to come back, plus Yajirobe, another um, favorite. Yajirobe of all people saves the day twice in that fight. That even the weakest members have, and Yajirobe is pretty cowardly too, have something to contribute, can help save the day. But it is optimistic that the day will be saved. It might take in fact, it will take sacrifice. You lose people, but that's just part of the journey. That Piccolo dies, we lose the Dragon Balls, but we defeated Vegeta, we've saved Earth, and you know, set off on the next adventure while also laying the seeds that for Vegeta's redemption and becoming a core part of the cast and marrying Bulma, who's been there since the beginning,
Hmm.
but finding his place in the world, because he just needed to be, needed to get beaten down, first, but then has a chance to, okay, let me think this through. I mean, it's an
Hmm.
incredibly optimistic, um, hey, take on the world of, yeah, sometimes you do need to get knocked down and beaten up, but you can improve from there. You can become better. You can bounce back with training, or you can realize the error of your ways. You might be that, okay, yes, you were the Vegeta or the Piccolo. You need to realize the error of your ways and have a chance to, okay, come back, try again, reconfigure, change your ways.
Hmm. No, I agree. For considering the fact that Toriyama kind of had to think on his feet and make things up as he went along, he does a really good job of kind of working in those themes to make it seem so integrated. It does feel very natural. Like most of those things, I wouldn't have guessed, earlier in the show that Vegeta, who was such a horrible, villain, it seemed, this mass murderer who really does, yeah, crush our hero quite, literally and figuratively, and
Mhm.
really puts him in this really desperate situation, uh, finally is able to find redemption is pretty cool. And I do think
Mhm.
that is one reason why maybe people gravitate to him and other characters. Um, yeah, I was curious though. In addition to that, so Peter, tell me, why do you like Krillin so much? Is it because he has to also, like you said, find his way to keep adding to things, even though he's no longer as powerful? Or are there other aspects to emulate? Because I've always enjoyed Krillin as kind of that everyman character, and I think he's funny. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering
yeah.
if there's some of that for you.
So Krillin's a great, yeah, great everyman character. He's funny. He gets a lot of great lines. The Dragon Ball Z Abridged does the Krillin KO count. That's always fun.
Mhm.
But I like that A, he sticks around. B, he is a support character. He knows his job is not, okay, I'm not going to win the fights, but I can help. I can do this. I can help this. I can just, the number of times that Solar Flare has,
Oh yeah,
disrupted that, simple, dumb technique that,
it
just
works.
he keeps bringing it back and finding new uses for it. And, stop Cell at one point.
Mhm.
And Tien gets it, some of the maybe more famous moment of that. Um, um, but there is that aspect, and it's something that I think in my own life, if I've had, my friend Matt kind of was always the, high school was the Krillin to me. He was the sidekick. He was the person that, okay, I'm going to drag along on some dumb adventure, but he's going to have my back, and I'm going to rely on him. That in turn, I've probably been the Krillin to other people. Sometimes you do wear that hat of, okay,
Hmm.
I'm here to help. Um, and I think he has, um, regardless of um, everything else, is able to recognize the android's humanity,
Hmm.
in the same way
The
that Goku recognized the humanity of Vegeta, or, the redeemability of Vegeta. But Krillin's the one that says, yeah, we should also bring them back and also, not leave them with ticking time bombs inside that are going to, that could blow up and destroy the world because, you know, probably just a bad idea. But then
Mhm.
contributes to the redemption of 18, which then, um, allows for 17's redemption, which again comes back in Dragon Ball Super in a way that I would have, that, I mean, I don't think Toriyama had some big plan, but saw this as, okay, there is this, redeemability, but Krillin is also the one that, um, maybe most reflects us. He's aging, he's getting older, he's slowing down in ways that, at some point you realize your own life, like, yeah, I am becoming Krillin, where I'm,
Mhm.
it's okay that you're not out there leading the charge. It's okay you're not, your being on the front lines as a fighter is at some point you're going to be the teacher, you're going to be the support, you're going to be the
Hmm.
um, guy helping out. And and even then, sometimes it is best to run away. Um,
Wow.
to steal the Dragon Ball and run, as is often his role. But still finding ways to contribute, being part of
Wow.
that.
That's
But
I thought I knew Krillin, but that's probably the most profound take on it I've heard. We all do kind of become Krillin. We might not necessarily be the stars or hero, but we're the support class, and that's fine. You need them. Sometimes in life, you just got to take that Dragon Ball and run, man. Getting older. Do what
yeah,
you can. No, wow, that's very poignant. Wow, that's well said. Well said on that one, man. Wow, wow. I feel like I'll have to do a deep dive analysis on that at some point because that's pretty good. That's probably one reason why I like Krillin too. It's just he's so relatable, and you know, I think he's a character that once again, growing up, everybody made fun of Krillin, but I always liked him a lot. But he definitely has become my favorite over time because of that, and on some of those reasons you mentioned as well. And
yeah,
I think he's grown more popular in the fandom. I think people appreciate him a lot more than they used to, at least over here in the West. Would you say?
yeah. I think he's gotten that kind of revision that is deserved, and it's always he's always been who he is. That's been there from the beginning. Yeah, he does have a role to play in the recent movies and in Super.
Hmm.
But he does, and even with the Dragon Ball Z Abridged, they stopped doing the you know call it own count at some point because, like, yeah, um, the joke isn't as funny anymore because his role in the narrative changes and
Hmm.
um, becomes a more um, interesting figure than where he started. In the same way that Piccolo, or not precisely the same way, but as Piccolo becomes more interesting over time and more nuanced and goes through stuff, and needs to figure out his
See,
place in the world.
it's funny for as simplistic as these characters are on the show is there is stuff to think about, which I think
Mhm.
is you're bringing up more things, which is I think proof that it's simple, but at the same time there's definitely some good conversations and there's more nuance to it than maybe people gave credit for. So I love that you keep bringing that up. See, so I think it's simple, but there's a little more to it than people may have thought back in the day. And now we know there's just like so much conversation about it, which is great.
Yeah, yeah, but I
Um,
think it's a testament to Toriyama's, because the art is not particularly complicated. I have several friends that learn to draw basically by okay, I'm going to do what Toriyama does, and kind of do those Toriyama style characters, that are simple. They're easy to do, comparatively to a
but
lot of other.
I bet, yeah, I know, like definitely compared to some other mangaka, there's definitely is a simplicity to the designs,
Mhm.
but I bet you that accessibility, much like the show itself, probably got a lot of young people to draw and got really inspired their interest to grow as artists, sketch artists and whatnot. So, maybe that's another way he had a huge impact too. Just a lot of people love to practice drawing. You got to start somewhere, and
Yeah,
from that simple template. Absolutely. Um, that is, yeah, what an impact. Well, I'll tell you what, Peter, I will have to leave kind of soon. So I want to use the little bit of time we have left I wanted you to, I remember you mentioned before we recorded that you also have some appreciation for some of Toriyama's work outside of Dragon Ball, which I'll admit I'm not as familiar with. So I would like you to share some of that wisdom with us if you choose.
yeah. So I have an abiding love for Dr. Slump. It is very different from Dragon Ball, although not you know, character designs are sort of similar. The comedy series, I'd recommend anyone that enjoys the comedic aspects of Dragon Ball, check it out. It's a little rough around the edges. It's definitely Um, not as consistently good. But it's sort of, if you've seen the original, if you've watched Dragon Ball Z, you've done the original Dragon Ball, you want more in that vein. I definitely suggest checking it out. And I love that Toriyama finds ways to bring it up in his other, Ariel shows up in the original Dragon Ball for an extended bit. But the characters still continue, these citizens of Penguin Village still continue to be part of his stories going forward and are referenced in other media, and are a lot of fun, and lead to some interesting discussions, of this sort of more, because I would say Dr. Slump is a little more cartoonish, is a little sillier. Um, it's a little more Looney Tunes-ish, in its sensibilities.
Mhm.
Little less grounded. Saying Dragon Ball Z is grounded, maybe a little bit. Um, yeah.
It's more a little more serious, perhaps, tonally
Yes. Yeah. Serious. Probably the way to put it.
dramatic.
Dramatic. But it's one that I basically found because I ran out of Dragon Ball manga to read and was like, okay, what else is, um, what else is there?
With I'm curious, Peter, because I don't know this. With Doctor Slump, is it just like wacky hijinks, very episodic, or is there kind of a narrative? Is there a plot? I wasn't really sure.
It is very episodic.
Okay.
It's you can kind of just pick up anywhere. The show is a lot of fun. It's again a
Mhm.
little more rough around the edges. I think there was several revivals of that. But it's fun. Humor is a little bit lowbrow at times. Like there's an actual walking poop character as part of the plot. But if you like that kind of stuff, it's fun.
What?
And I would say it's something that, if you're like, yeah, Dragon Ball Z is a little, you got kids. Dr. Slump would be a good place to start if you're, like, yeah, Dragon Ball is a little too much for them right now. That could actually be a good place to start with Toriyama if you're looking for kind of a simpler, quieter point of introduction.
Hmm, cool. Well, I know you talked a bit about Doctor Slump, and did you play Chrono Trigger? Because
Yes.
I remember I, I I a couple of years ago I was like, oh wait, I'm looking at this art style for this cutscene of this old RPG they say you got to play, and I'm like, this looks a lot like Dragon Ball. Like, oh wait, Toriyama did the art design for it. Like, oh, now that I played a little bit, I'm like, oh yeah, this feels like a Dragon Ball, but more fantasy esque, traditional
Yeah,
fantasy. So
yeah,
yeah.
I will say that yeah, the Dragon Quest games and Chrono Trigger, the main characters all look an awfully lot like usually Gohan, is the
Mm,
point. The eyes and head shape and all of that. But I love his art styles in those. A lot of people
mhm,
talked about the slime from Dragon Quest that is a perfect design, of a
mm,
very, this classic design that has, formed the franchises. If you ever want to like look at like great character designs, little bluish green teardrop with eyes and a smile, from Dragon
mhm,
Quest, is
mhm,
just a perfect video game design. But I wanted to talk,
mhm,
I think with Chrono Trigger specifically, his character designs are great. They come through clearly in game. But I loved he'd draw these little scenes. Never really showed up in game. But if you look at the box cover and the manual and other places, and I always felt
mhm,
like they told this story in a way that is unique, that he could tell a whole story with this, just a image of these characters sitting around a campfire, or even the
mhm,
character designs themselves of Robo, the robot, looking a little bit, just a little bit weathered, that told the story in a way that speaks to his style and capacity for art in a way that, um, is part of the game, but also part of this larger world. And he always had a great sense of just simple images of moments, And this was true of Dragon Ball as well. If you look at the cover for the manga, often these big crowd scenes of people riding on the car or whatever, that was something special, that he could tell these stories through these images, that a character design could tell you everything you need to know about this person and sort of inform those first impressions that then build out from there. So I do, Chrono Trigger is one of the great RPGs that, it's no need for me to sing its praises to death, but just look at those scenes, those images that he drew. He was responsible for with the re-release with PlayStation, and I think now the Steam version that has the anime cutscenes that are, pretty well done and a key part of the game and the design, that are a lot of fun. But just those singular images of the characters doing little things, fighting battles, doing this or that, that tell a whole story in a way that not a lot of our other artists could. There was something to him for his sense of detail, of motion, of telling a whole story in a single image, that I think comes through very effectively on Chrono Trigger in particular.
So you'd say that Toriyama definitely was like really had a knack. It sounds like through his character design, and I've definitely heard that in people analyzing his manga, and just he was really well versed in the strengths of comic book storytelling and the visual sense of through character design and motion and using space well. And you're right, just telling a story through just even like one of those off random pieces of art he might have, that he might have Goku, like you're right, camping by a fire, fishing. Like there's definitely something in there. There's a sense of majesty and wonder and connection through the simplicity of it. That I think he does tell a lot of story even when he doesn't have any dialogue, which might be another thing he speaks to too. Actually, I was debating when I was going to bring this up a little while ago. I actually got the Dragon Ball visual history.
Oh yeah.
If you ever get a chance to get it, it's pretty cool. It literally just collects like all the different additions to the manga volumes and sketch designs, just various art from the magazines, and you get a lot of those random fun one-off pieces that I throughout all of it, which is very cool. So yeah, definitely appreciating his artwork. Just a great visual storyteller too, which I think he probably had a lot of inspiration for a lot of other manga creators and cartoonists, just animators, for sure. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, wow. Yeah. Any of the number of like eulogies put out by his fellow mangakas and other animators and artists, and not just in Japan but in America and across the world. Is inspiring. Just sheer, this is somebody that had, I think, an influence on the level of Hayao Miyazaki or Walt Disney, in terms of, or Karl Barks, for that matter, just the sheer style and what it meant and how many people, what this meant to so many.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. I don't know if I could say any better than that. Really, really, such a testament to his work was the reaction, outpouring of love after his passing, and now we've added to it best we can with just two geeky guys discussing it. But yeah, I think we both have a great love for Dragon Ball and Toriyama's work in general, and yeah, a big part of my life, and I'm very happy that I've been able to connect with it and view it, man. I really have.
Yeah, something that I reflected on, that watching this, probably in middle school, I started watching Dragon Ball, somewhere around there. But then watching the undub with my sisters in high school, this kind of like collective experience, and that's what Dragon Ball's always been. I remember in college, having a trampoline fight with my friend Renee, where we were just like, yeah, we're going to play Dragon Ball right now, and doing elaborate attacks and falling over and yelling. That is just this. Now, we're sitting here. This is 30 years on. you know, 25 year, you know, we're well, you know, having these conversations, um, that this is just,
Yep.
yeah, this through line through my own life, continues, and you know, and it will continue to be this point of, shared experience with plenty of other people in the years to come.
And that's a great point. You were kind of thinking the same lines there. It is really good that through Dragon Ball or just other pieces of media or stories that that's really the importance of them, is just be able to bring people together through a shared experience and have those discussions and have fun and shared memories. And Toriyama added to that. And I'll tell you, I never would have thought like this little show that I watched as a kid, that I just thought was really weird, would I'd be talking about 25 years later, just with serious discussion with all these episodes and so much more knowledge about it. So definitely pretty cool thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, I think. Good job, Toriyama.
Yeah, yeah, it is
I
that.
can't wait to see
Yeah,
more of
we are all on that, you know, we're all journeying through life and meeting those people and going through Goku and Krillin and Piccolo's same journeys. Just in our own, less flashy.
Less bombastic way, but yes, we
Yeah, a
have
little, yeah,
our
little
journeys.
quieter, a little, you know, less shouts and
Explosions.
transformations and more, but it does, you know, there is something there that I think, almost everybody has, you know, some Dragon Ball story to tell or some connection,
Hmm.
and that
Absolutely,
matters.
it does. Yeah, man. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. That's a great note to end it on. Yeah. What an impact, Toriyama. Peter and I agree, and I'm sure that a lot of you do too. So please share your stories and keep that conversation going. I'm sure you will without us encouraging you. But yeah, love Dragon Ball. Love Toriyama's work. What a guy. What a creative force.
Yeah, yeah, truly a loss, but, you know, I'm glad he got the recognition in his own lifetime,
Hmm.
you know, for the work he did, and had the appreciation of fans. You know, I think that, yeah, the outpouring after, certainly speaks to that, but I think he was somebody that recognized the impact he had, before he went.
I agree, and never was that more clear at the end too. So yeah,
Mhm.
we got Goku in the Thanksgiving Day parade. That. I
Yeah.
think you made it by that point, right? All right, Dr. Peter. Well, this has been a great conversation. I could talk about Dragon Ball for more hours, but alas, going along with the Joe Manduke, journey adventure, I have appointments to keep and wives to meet up with. So, well, only one though. But yeah, so I'll
Yeah.
have to wrap it up. But I want to say thank you for coming along, Dr. Peter, and you and I will have to have some other sci-fi fantasy related
Yeah, I
discussion
think
in the.
there, yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to dig into at some point. So we'll find some time and, have some more, wondrous and strange discussions.
Absolutely, maybe even one or two in person. We'll see.
Mm,
We'll see.
yeah, maybe we'll have
Mm,
to
mm,
find some
mm.
time.
Yeah, we will. Maybe we'll have to try. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for watching, listening. Say goodbye, Dr. Peter.
Goodbye, Dr. Peter.
All right, everybody. Take care and stay magical.